Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to the Writer's Room. I'm your host, the night editor, Kat Rocha, and with me as always is...
J Ishiro Finney, author and alien a human suit, who has recently published Scars on Amazon.com. Go buy it.
William
I'm the
Hastings,
Beast Lord.
author of Vagabond Legacy and self-proclaimed voice of a generation.
Yes, William returns.
Yes, I'm back. I have recovered from whatever it is that you guys were told that I was suffering from.
Death.
Death.
Yes, I've recovered from death.
Yeah, and a long beard. I figured
Buddy, and they all got like a little bit of money together. They went and they got the Dragon Balls and they wished me back. And
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And
Why
Buddy?
did we have to kill an elephant for that? I don't remember. Hey guys, my name is
Barbecue.
Buddy. My book Sins of the Fae is launching on June the 5th, and I'm happy to be here to talk about Adam's book.
Excellent.
Yes.
Yeah, and our guest tonight is Adam Lane Smith, author of everything from Holy Nights in a Post-Apocalyptic Wasteland to badass future cops who have an obsession with spicy burritos.
Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here tonight.
Well, we're happy to have you.
So I guess just to start off, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, Adam?
Oh, man, there's a lot there. Not all of it's good. Okay, so I am a licensed psychotherapist. I have written 14 books. I'm currently writing number 15 and 16 simultaneously. I've published 10 books. I've got a bunch of courses over on Gumroad, stretching from how to write, how to edit, psychological matters, how to live with purpose, how to get a girlfriend. My specialty in psychotherapy is post-traumatic stress disorder and also human attachment. I'm one of the leading experts in the United States, actually, on human attachment. I've written the #1 bestseller. Yeah, I guess that's me. I'm a little bit all over the place. Currently, I'm obsessing over a show called Garo, so maybe that'll tell you something about me.
Well, I've got a question already. There are those writers who say, do not write anything but one book at a time and do not leave that book till it's done. You're writing 2 books at once. Tell us about that.
So I do have a tough time going back and forth between them. I don't know that I necessarily do that completely, but I do have Gideon Ira 3 is open, and I'm drooling over it as I'm sort of thinking about it, but I'm currently writing also another project. So I tend to try not to work on more than one book at a time in the same phase. Sometimes I'll edit a book and write a book.
Okay.
Typically, yeah. It's hard to cross the streams, you know. You want to keep that tone pure. You don't want your ridiculous bloodthirsty killing to show up in a romance book that you're trying to write. Or, well, maybe you do, I guess.
I mean, these days you never know.
That's true.
Well, blood and romance, they tend to go hand in hand.
What is
That's
the subtitle
remarkably
for
true.
the new Wastelanders book?
So the Gideon Ira #3, Castle Bloodgast.
Nice. Very dramatic. I like it.
Everything about that series is as dramatic as possible.
Sounds like a D&D supplement.
Yeah, sort of.
So I guess on that note, let's get into the Wastelanders series. You have been writing a series in a post-apocalyptic United States where it's somewhere with what? Kind of Mad Max with demons roaming the earth, and Gideon is a holy knight in power armor.
Correct.
It sounds like something that comes from Rift, not D&D.
So give us kind of a rundown on that.
So I knew that I wanted to write something Christian, something really like Christian bloodthirsty action, just ridiculous pulp, over the top, influenced by Warhammer 40K, influenced by the Constantine comics. I wanted to write something that was just absolutely way over the top. And it really was also spawned from kind of a dark time in my life. One of my family members had recently committed suicide. So I had a lot of darkness that I was working through as I was previously working on an extremely lighthearted fantasy series of light novels with illustrations, and everyone was cheerful, and then suicide hit. So that wasn't working out so great. I swapped over this darker series, and it seemed to just flow perfectly.
Is
So
that
it
other
all
series you're talking about, Savage Hunters?
it is indeed. So I've got Savage Hunters 1, 2, and 3 all written. Only the first one is out. So there's a couple reasons for that, but right now my focus has been Deus Vult Wastelanders and this new series that I'm writing that I can't talk about yet, but it'll get there.
Cool. And so how did you come about with the concept for Gideon Ira then?
Well, I was reading a lot of Conan the Barbarian.
That shows.
Yeah, I was reading a lot of it. I dissected actually his first story, Robert E. Howard's first story, The Tower of the Elephant. I went through it and just ripped apart the first chapter in depth, just to kind of look at what he did that made it so interesting. And I found some things that modern editors would just eviscerate him for. An overwhelming use of adverbs, tremendous amounts of adjectives that just smash up the sentence so that you've got, instead of a sentence of 20 words, you've got a sentence of 40 words and half of them are adjectives, things like that. And I fell in love with his writing style because of how I dissected it and how it looked once I actually pulled it apart on the page. It became so apparent that he was brilliant in an amateurish kind of way that worked so perfectly that he understood exactly what storytelling is supposed to be, which is conveying messages, not even messages, conveying virtues and moral principles in a way that's entertaining for the audience. That was the purest form of storytelling he was really reaching for. It was completely unfettered by modern concepts of what literature ought to be and what sentences should be and how to look professional. And I fell in love with that and said, I want to write like this. I don't want to write like everyone's been telling me I should write. I want to write this gut-wrenching, visceral, straight from the right side of the brain, splatter on the page kind of pulp. And that was my guide.
Well, that Jeff definitely jumped out at me the moment I picked up the book and started reading it. In a sense, you do get that kind of a deep, booming voice of Mako over your head. This is a tale for another time. Through the whole thing, it's got this sense that
dun.
Yeah, you've got this deep voice narrating this epic legend to you from ages past, kind of feel, which caught me off guard because, the first thing I'd read by you was Maxwell Cain, which is just this pulpy, bizarre, cyberpunk parody, 80s cop action story that's just hilarious and over the top, beyond over the top.
And you want to talk about even more jarring, people who started at the very beginning with me, I wrote Making Peace. And William, you've read that one. That was my very first book, and it took me 3 years to write, and I poured my PTSD specialty into it. So every single character is crafted around a different manifestation of post-traumatic stress disorder paired with a different disorder that would also complicate them. So each character manifests PTSD throughout the story, either as they're introduced or they develop it through the course of the story. And that's the prime piece of that story. Then I rolled from that, this incredibly deep, like there's suicide on the pages. Characters are working through these deep traumas. There's intense conversations and it's very serious. And I rolled into Burrito Avenger and my audience was just completely shook.
It's quite the change. And if anybody hasn't read Making Peace, I highly recommend it, especially if I know we have a lot of overlap in our audience, but if you've read and enjoyed Spark and you haven't read Making Peace was something that I read right towards the end of when I was working on Spark with Kat, and it really helped me clinch a lot of the emotional weight of that story. So it was a big inspiration, and it's my personal favorite of your books. So
Thank you. This new series I am writing, I can't talk about it yet because I'm going through a publisher and they probably wouldn't appreciate me splattering it all over the place. But it is much more a return to my Making Peace days, to that mental, the mental social aspect of it. There is combat in it, but I got a lot of that out with Deus Vult Wastelanders, and it is definitely where I'm funneling most of my destructive impulses is into Deus Vult Wastelanders and Gideon Ira especially, so that I'm free to do a lot more socialization and mental work over in my new series.
And you recently came out with a sequel to Burrito Avenger. Yep.
I did. So it's much shorter. It's like half the length of the first, maybe a little more than that. It's about 40,000 words, almost on the dot. It's really paper thin, and I threw it up there for 99 cents. When the shutdown happened, my therapy office closed. We weren't sure what was going to happen. There was a gap where no one was seeing any patients because we couldn't figure out the online thing yet. And I said, okay, it's time for me to just write up some books. And I conceived and outlined and wrote Burrito Avenger #2 in rapid release kind of style. And then I said, you know what? Everyone really needs a pick-me-up right now. So I just blasted it out for 99 cents. It was just to boost the community and help everyone feel a little bit better as this whole thing was going on. So
what do you make of Bar One Studios' comment here that says Maxwell Kane is Sledgehammer, but the stuff that the chief complains about and happens off screen?
That's a fair approximation.
And for those of you who are not Gen Xers out there, Sledgehammer was a far too shortly lived TV series that was pretty much a gonzo, bizarre, off-the-wall parody of Dirty Harry and every other badass cop action movie of the 80s.
It's very worth it.
The real giveaway was that the gun he talked to his gun and the gun talked back. And it was not as high tech. It was just a regular gun.
It's very worth checking out.
He was the only one that could hear it, though, right?
I think so.
Well,
if I'm remembering right, I hope so. That would be so
know that
perfect.
from D&D, if your weapon talks to you, be warned, it might be smarter than you.
It's probably
Hey.
Well, in this case, it really was. Well, the gun kept calling him Amigo.
Nikki's rifle talks to her, but there's a dragon in the rifle, so
yeah,
you gotta be careful about that.
So once again, proven probably.
But okay, so we've got some other questions here. Underworld Dream asks, Mad Max, so does that mean there will be plenty of mohawks, leather, and assless chaps?
So it is
Gideon Ira.
It is a Christian story, but it is not preachy in any way. It simply takes the Christian mythos as complete fact and then says, okay, what kind of world would spring up around that? So not every character is a Christian. There's, the city of Los Angeles is still in existence, and now they have carved out 9 descending layers of the city underneath. So you have the 9 layers of Los Angeles down in the dark, and it's a neon post-apocalyptic dystopian future underneath there where some tech has survived, and that shows up later on in some of the books.
Is this the Patreon series, Neon Knights?
Yep, correct. It's also present in the 3rd book, Valkyrie Doll and the Ashen Brotherhood. They actually go to the ruins of, not ruins, the 9 descending layers of Los Angeles. They actually go there in that series briefly. Neon Knights is set entirely there. So yes, there are some places where mohawks, assless chaps, and all those good things show up. There's also the Christian villages where everyone's dressed a lot more conservatively and sweetly, and all the, girl in a wheat field kind of aesthetic. But there's everything, man. I wanted to cover everything. It's not this happy saccharine hallmark kind of Christian setting. It is very much blood and guts and good and evil and people who believe, people who don't believe, and it is all kinds of good stuff.
It's like a mix between a Goblin Slayer and a Cecil B. DeMille movie, like Ben-Hur.
If you're operating off the notion that because it's working off of a Christian universe is the rules of the setting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're basically saying it's a Christian novel in the same way Dracula is a Christian novel. I mean,
Yes.
Does that really count? I mean, it's really just kind of thematic, isn't it?
Yes, very much so. The last thing I'd ever want to do is preach at anyone, and I'm certainly not trying to, how do I want to say, I am not looking to turn anyone or convert anyone through this book, because I figure either the Christians are going to pick it up and read it and they already believe, or people are just looking for a good story. My first and foremost goal for this thing was to tell a good story people could enjoy, and that's really it. So I've had plenty of atheists tell me they absolutely loved the story. They just take it as another fantasy novel.
I mean, if you really wanted to read into Buffy too far, you could claim it's a Christian setting.
Hey, you know what?
I mean, really, it's just, what rules are you playing by? I wanted to ask about Valkyrie Doll. What connection is that to Gideon?
So it's the same setting. I've actually got a few different storylines happening within the Deus Vult Wastelanders just brand world and setting in general. So Valkyrie doll branches off because in book 2, Gideon meets a young woman who happens to be an android, fully sentient android guardian of the wasteland. It was very much inspired by Nier Automata.
Oh, nice.
So Valkyrie doll is another one of the Valkyries who was created basically at the end of our current age. She was created at the end as sort of this guardian that was supposed to push back the waves of demons coming on humanity. They were set up to be like the last line of defense and the last desperate hope, and then humanity fell anyway, so now they wander the wastelands trying desperately to protect the remnants of mankind. But they live apart, very much apart from humans because they aren't human. They are sentient androids, but again, in a Christian setting. So they sort of grapple with this concept of where do I fit in a Christian reality when I'm an android and don't have a actual soul. I'm not created by God. I'm created by mankind. Where do I fit with that? So I wanted to write that into Valkyrie doll, of this grappling with I'm a created being with no soul, but I'm here to protect people and help them get to heaven. So that's where the Valkyrie doll.
The idea of an angel, more or less.
Somewhat, actually. Yeah, you actually get pretty close to what I
I mean, because an angel, I remember writing a poem, Angel Outside My Window, and the whole thing was, a lot of people don't get it, but angels have no will. They can't be forgiven. They can only serve. That's the reason why the host fell.
That's true.
So, what you're saying, like an android, like, oh, I wasn't, I was created, I wasn't born, and I don't have a soul, I can't be forgiven. Same kind of thing. And then the whole Valkyrie idea, I mean, there's so many borrowed legends from, like, especially Nordic mythology that go into the Christian mythos. I mean, even the beginning, the progenitors began with A and E.
Mm-hmm. What's really interesting is when you dive in and you look at it, this concept of a soul divorced from a body is a very modern concept. So early on, especially in the Christian church, and what the Catholic Church actually looks at is a soul must exist for a physical presence to be also existing. So if you see someone who is physically present, then there must be some sort of soul attached. Now, it may be a soul or an immortal soul. But there is a soul, because that simply is just the spiritual manifestation of your being, and this is your physical manifestation. They are not separated.
Yeah, wasn't it one point the soul and the spirit two different things?
They may have been. That I don't know. I'm not educated enough to say that. But
okay. So let's see.
One thing we didn't really touch on was that Gideon Ira and the rest of the Deus Vult Wastelander books were crowdfunding campaigns, and you've had a lot of success on Kickstarter and other platforms.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Bringing your books to life. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. And that's a big question. Is there anything in specific you kind of want me to start on, at least? So I can ramble from there.
It seems like you're one of the first indie authors to really start using this new platform to get your stories out there, and successfully. And other writers, Brian Niemeyer and Rob Krause have sort of followed suit, but you've sort of been one of the big breakout successes. What do you think goes into that?
I would probably attribute that to the strength of the people that I know more than myself. I've diversified myself, not just when I'm on Twitter, for example. I don't just talk to author Twitter. I talk to self-improvement Twitter. I've got a masculinity circles I travel in. I've got all these different people. So it was very novel for most of my groups when I came out. Novel, there's a pun for you. It was very novel for them when I came out with my Kickstarter and said, hey, look, I wrote a book. It blew most of them away because they weren't my author circles. They were like, wow, this guy wrote a book. He's one of our buddies. Everyone support him. And they all came rolling out to blast out my campaign. That happened with Burrito Avenger, happened again with the Deus Vult Wastelanders. It ended up funding all 3 of the first books on one single campaign with money left over on that one. So that honestly, diversifying into different groups, so I wasn't just trying to bleed dry the same author groups over and over and over, that really helped. I think that's something that a lot of authors make the mistake of, is staying within our own ghetto. And if you can branch out into other areas where you have expertise, that helps tremendously.
I was thinking about that. You know, I mean, I'm crowdfunding a book soon, and when I begin, and I'm crowdfunding it as it's a graphic novel based on a prose, like 5 manuscripts
Mhm.
that I've already written, and I decided to kind of break it down into novella, short form, light novels.
Mhm.
So like some pictures for the prose, and I'm offering that, but I'm also doing the graphic novel. And what I realized is going against a lot of these people in the comic book market is like, okay, I'm not going to do action as well as a guy that's been drawing it and seeing it for 30 years. I just
Mhm.
don't have that experience. But what I can do is I can tell a story as good as anybody. So I can bring, a different kind of storytelling and a different understanding. Because
Mhm.
when I started to see, I started to really read comics and really look at manga and that kind of thing and see how they were actually telling the story, visually. And not only, like you were talking about earlier, I was really into that, talking about Conan and, how the author that wrote it in a simple way, but very viscerally. And he had a simple understanding on how to convey that. And like you said, I mean, I think so many people get caught up in the minutia, they forget to write.
Yeah.
They forget to communicate,
Very true.
because that is what the essence of this is. Us as authors translating our image in a way that communicates to you something. And the most primal thing that we can communicate, the most primal thing we can share is emotion. That's empathy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as a psychologist, you understand that. And I actually I have a PsyD from St. Mary's in
Nice.
San Antonio, so I know what you're talking about, brother.
There you go. Perfect.
And it does help understanding that. I'm sorry, go ahead, sir.
Some of the best advice I ever got was from 2 different people. Number one was from Nick Cole, the author I personally look up to. He's mentored me for a lot of years. He's a wonderful human being. His advice to me was, remember that the purpose of our writing is to help people in their darkest moments when they just need to escape into a good story and enjoy themselves. Whether you're writing horror or you're writing a romance book, whatever it might be, you're writing for the guy who's sitting by his wife's hospital bed and he needs to forget some of the bad medical reports that have been coming up. You're writing for the young kid who his family is dead broke and he's sitting there huddled in his cold apartment because they can't afford the heat, and he needs a good adventure to sink into so he can kind of forget some of his troubles. That's what our storytelling is for. We're not writing these things to win awards. We're writing these things to just give some enjoyment to people who need it. And the other piece of advice I got was from an editor I used to work with back when I did podcasting and stuff myself. His was always ask yourself, who is my audience? And if you can keep that in mind, keep in mind what your audience is going to want, understand them, dive into their mind, and then tailor what you do to them so they will enjoy it. They will always come back for more.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's very simple, especially right now with the COVID thing, now with the thing that happened in Minnesota and everything that's going across the country, the widespread fear, paranoia, manic, is we need more heroes, hope, and humor and less deconstruction in literature than we've needed in the past 60 years. Yeah. Or maybe even since, the 1920s French, when the deconstruction came up and it became popular. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think we just need more of the good stuff. We need more of that primal empathy and just a connection at a human level. And, all this other crap, it's garbage.
I'll take you one step further because I just wrote, it was like a 5,000 word blog post maybe last week about the last 7 generations of Americans and Europeans here in the West, Western storytelling. The last 7 generations in our slide from heroes to dark heroes to anti-heroes, and how we're now sliding back from, we have this massive schism happening in storytelling where they want completely broken, unfixable anti-heroes on the corporate storytelling, and the other side wants true classical heroes in the old classic Greek style of true classic heroes. They want uplifting moral people who strive for the true objective greater good. And there's this massive schism with very little room in between. And mostly what we're getting is these absolutely broken anti-heroes who embody
Heroes, they're villains that we're told
Correct.
are
At
heroes.
this point,
Correct.
we've gotten past anti-hero. These are outright villains that the
That's
Hollywood
just-
types relate to.
That's very good, and right there, bingo. It's something that the audience, the Hollywood types, and the audience, very unhappy, bleak, nihilistic people, can relate to and validate the feelings they're experiencing. This person, these heroes, they're rejected by society. Everyone treats them like crap, and then they begrudgingly do good. They hate it every step of the way, and at the end, everyone finally acknowledges that they were the good one all along. And then that anti-hero / villain spits in everyone's face and said, "I don't want you, and now I'm rejecting you now that I get the choice." And they walk off. Maybe their love interest is there in the background, loving them from afar, but will never get too close to them. And that's what we're told is supposed to be the best, the pinnacle of human achievement. So it's validation on one hand for their experiences, or it's what original storytelling was designed to be, which is a vehicle for teaching moral lessons. It's one or the other. It's validating feelings or a vehicle for teaching moral lessons. It's one or the other.
And I think that's one of the reasons that corporate storytelling primarily is being rejected, is because it's that classical structure being manipulated by people who don't believe in good or evil or truth or anything like that. And they're taking this format and they're wearing it like a skin suit and parading it around, and people are rejecting it.
Correct.
Have any of you watched the recent Red Letter Media Plinkett deconstruction of Picard and what's wrong with it?
No.
Are any of you familiar with Red Letter Media?
They destroy that thing.
Yeah, you know what? The whole thing, after a while, it gets tedious, but like the last 10 minutes, where you get like this montage of from Kirk to even Archer, right? And just this kind of, you watch it and it takes you back to all those warm places and all this uplifting confidence and belief that we can move further and, you know, we can dream and explore. And you get this really great feeling watching these captains in action.
Even Janeway.
Yeah, even Janeway. And then it just cuts off and gives you a montage of the new, Picard.
And some of
Enterprise,
STD.
STD, and you just want to vomit. It is so unrecognizably vile and violent. People getting their eyes ripped out, people screaming. It was just, oh God! There you go. An example. It's right there.
It's storytelling that the modern storytelling from corporate levels is validation. You look at look at Captain Marvel. It's validating the angry feminist viewers, saying it's okay for you to feel that way, and here's someone you can look right at and say, this is me beating the crap out of people you don't like. That's what that was. It's not a vehicle for moral lessons and moral guidance to instill the moral values of the society. It's validation of anger, and it's a fantasy trip. That's all that is.
And a complete rejection of the concept of there even being
correct
a moral compass or a right and wrong.
Correct.
I mean, really, with feminism, it's just power, and that's it.
Correct.
Okay, so we have a few questions for you. First one we've got is from this character named Owen Lister, and he wants to know, Adam Lane Smith, do you know our Lord and Savior, Guyver?
I confess that I do not.
You have confessed your sin of not knowing Guyver.
Sorry, Owen. Just, not another sinner, apparently. Star Storyteller. So she wants to know, can androids in your setting suffer demonic possession?
That's a good question. I haven't crossed that bridge yet, and I'd have to research a lot more. See, everything I do in the setting, I work with a trained theologian who has a master's degree in Christian studies, to really make sure everything I do is 100% on point. So I run those ideas by him and make sure that it's actually doable. I don't want to do something that would be completely out of left field and heretical.
All right, then when you write a vampire novel with that theologian, you let us all know, because I want to read that. Seriously, very much
fair. Fair enough.
Anime Acid Trip wants to know what the hell a masculinity troop is.
masculinity group. It's a fraternity, much like the old Rotary clubs. It's a place for men to gather and discuss those masculine virtues to encourage each other. It's really just a fraternity in the most oldest common sense that you could think.
I've heard
So
of
it's like
as,
a voluntary Lord of the Flies.
No, opposite actually. It's mostly so I'm in the fraternity of excellence. It's mostly fathers and businessmen, millionaires, and people working
Okay.
themselves out of poverty. It's everything. It's every guy who just wants to be a better father and have traditional masculine virtues.
Yeah,
So like I'm not running
I
a
wish
commercial.
there were more groups like that.
So do I.
It really disgusts me that they've kind of been run out of town and told that, it's hateful and misogynistic for there to be men's groups. No, it's important for men to gather
Yeah, it is.
without women around. And so, yeah.
If young men can learn how to be healthy, loving, mature men from other men, then I think women benefit tremendously.
I think society itself benefits.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely
true.
agree with all of that. I got to say, because he's not going to say it, Ishii came out with a video a few years ago.
Oh,
It's
thank
like a
you.
letter to young boys. One of the best videos that everyone should definitely check out. It is amazing. It talks about how young men have not received the guidance that they need and what is the problem and how we can rectify that. It is a great video. It came out long before this was an issue, and everybody should check it out.
Thank you. I'll post a link in the chat in a minute here. Endless Nocturne asks, if Watchmen was a deconstruction of the superhero, are shows like My Hero Academia a reconstruction? I would say yes. Anybody else?
I have not seen My Hero Academia, but I will say this. Japanese storytelling has massively reinvigorated the actual superhero. Like I said, I'm obsessed right now with the show Garo. He's this like awesome golden knight who fights demons called horrors. It's this full-on toku. It's very much like Power Rangers, but for adults because it's dark and gory and awesome. But it's also got a superhero bend and it's legitimate heroism. The Japanese are reinvigorating superheroes, even as we are crapping all over them here in the West. So I wouldn't be shocked.
As far as to say fantasy as well. I've been unable to tear myself away from Goblin Slayer lately, and it's something about the good and evil of that story I find very visceral and appealing. It's like watching that one scene from Attack of the Clones over and over again until you don't feel sad anymore.
It was sorry. You go.
I was gonna comment. I agree with you that that Japan is definitely reinvigorating the superhero genre. A series that absolutely floored me was Boogie Pop, both the books and the television shows.
But that came out in the 90s, so it was ahead of its time.
Yeah, and it's on like Chris Claremont level as far as reinvigorating and putting a new spin on the superhero genre.
Or the idea of making superpowers and how it would affect the normal person more believable and yet heroic at the same time. People making moral choices is at the heart of all of them.
And that is the thing, is that it's very moral. It is very much so a tale of morals and where you stand. And there are very cut and dry good and bad people, and they are such because of the choices that they make.
And I would even go so far as to say, believe it or not, about a year or two ago, I read a ecchi manga, mainly because it looked hysterically funny, and it was called Don't Meddle with My Daughter. And the premise was, what if Power Girl had retired in her 40s and had a daughter who was kind of like Supergirl, but a complete moron. And they lived in a world in which Western heroes had to put up with all the crap that Japanese heroes have to put up with.
That's awesome.
Perverts. But what was weird was, while it starts as kind of this comedy, by the fourth and final book, you're like, my God, this is a real superhero tale with consequences and morals and the understanding of a hero's sacrifice and burden.
No.
Why is it that this silly book here understands superheroes better than our Marvel and DC?
Well, I mean, I think it's simple. I mean, we've talked about it before, and he was going into it earlier. He said, you're either, it's either a vehicle for, emotional department, or it's validation of some kind. And in this case, they want to validate who they are. I've said often that escapism has changed in the past 20 years. Escapism used to be, hey, look at Conan. Wouldn't it be cool to be Conan, or to imagine yourself as Conan, right? And it's become, well, I want Conan to be me. That's what they want. That's what they want.
That kind of goes back to Ishii and Kat's video about the difference between girls and women. Your Did Women Ruin Comics book video.
Hey, Kat?
Cool. Thank you.
That was essentially, I just knew that if I turned on the mic without her knowing and then pushed the question, that we were going to get a very, very good takedown and rant about what was wrong and what needed to be done.
Yeah, I rant.
And
ranting is good sometimes. You got to get your point across, but it's just, what is it? I can't remember the writer who said it, but he said, if you want to send a message, go Western Union. You're here to entertain.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
And finally, Star Storyteller asks, what about catharsis, like Dirty Harry, when Dirty Harry was written during a period in the 70s when victims' rights were being put down for criminals' rights? Is that validation? Well, I mean, it depends on how you look at Dirty Harry. I mean, definitely there were those people who took it that way, and I think a lot of people miss that in a lot of ways it's structured like a classic noir. What I got from it, that was Harry was a person who had a moral compass that wasn't going to be held back by moral relativism, and that he was willing to do what he knew was right, even if it meant he was going to get hurt in the process, and probably, it could ruin his career. He was going to do it because it had to be done.
He's very much Old Testament justice without regard for modern law, which I think is awesome.
That's a really good one.
So, let's see. All right, so we're a little over halfway through the show at this point. Would we want to bring up any of your other titles, Adam?
Well, I'm thinking what I have published that I can talk about.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about Savage Hunters? That was your second most recent project.
Sure.
Your fiction project, and that's the light novel with the illustrations.
Yep, hit me with your questions.
What was the impetus for that? Where did that come from? I know that you sidelined that to make way for Dia's Fault Wastelanders, but that was the one that you were working on beforehand.
Mm-hmm. I obsessively read light novels. My wife raises her eyebrow every time I get a shipment of new ones, and my shelves are bulging and sagging. I had to actually get another bookcase to handle them all. So I love light novels. They're, again, it's like a wave of pulp coming from Japan. It's a reinvigoration of the pulp genre even over there. And I wanted to write a light novel, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to write about. And then I started playing Monster Hunter, whatever the newest one was. It was enjoyable. I can't remember the name of it, but I've been a Monster Hunter fan for a long time. And I said, okay, what if I take Monster Hunter and made a series almost about it, but in my own sort of spin, and did a whole light novel series on it. And that was my approach to it. I wanted to do lighthearted and fun, much like in the vein maybe of Konosuba or Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon. I wanted to take that sort of feel, but do a Monster Hunter story with it. So that turned into Savage Hunters. I've got 7 books planned. I've got 3 of them written, 1 of them published.
There's like a better, was it the Korea series, the Monster Slayer or whatever?
Monster Hunters Inc.
So it's I don't know. I don't know if you can even compare the two, because this is back in the Neolithic age and sort of an alternate fantasy reality. So it's Stone Age kind of fun in games where they've just developed agriculture, and they also have gigantic weapons that are like 8 feet long that they are using to fight these giant kaiju that are like 40 to 100 feet tall, that are wrecking their cities. So, take the early smaller Godzillas and put it up against Stone Age hunters that are using Monster Hunter weapons, and that's more of the story I'm writing there.
Okay.
And there's sort of an all ages aspect to Savage Hunters too. It has sort of a very broad appeal.
I wanted something that was more appealing for a very personal reason, because I wrote Making Peace, and my young niece, who was 13 at the time, asked me if she could read it, and I did not feel comfortable with her reading Making Peace because it is so incredibly dark. So I set out to write a series that would be appropriate for not only for her to read, but my daughter was also born around that time. And I was thinking, man, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to have this daughter that's going to read my books. I kind of want my daughter to be able to read something too. So it's both for my niece and for my daughter. So it's clean. There's no sexual material. I don't usually have sexual material in my books anyway, but there's really none in this series.
Well, I mean, there is uncensored hand holding.
Yeah, that's kind of true. I guess that's the most degenerate of all forms.
Yeah,
but
you get emails from Amazon about that.
That's probably true. Yeah, and I would frankly deserve them.
I think Parnell is in jail for that right
now. No, but that's what that series is all about. I wanted it to be clean. I wanted it to be young adult fiction that is not written for 45-year-old angry, unsatisfied housewives who are looking for pornography at a low reading level. I wanted young adult fiction for action.
So you didn't want it to be Twilight or 50 Shades of Grey, is that what you're saying?
No, correct. Yeah, I didn't want 50 Shades of Grey that happened to be set in a giant monster hunting world. So it's clean in those regards. There's not as much blood and gore. There's blood, but not as much like gore.
It's actual YA. You know, it's what YA was 10 years ago.
That's what I was aiming for.
I mean, 10 years ago, I'm older than I realized, but you know, there used to be this whole genre of fantasy for children that came out in the early 2000s, and it completely disappeared.
Yeah.
Well, because YA became the basically vehicle for what we were saying before, like liberal validation, more or less.
Angry moms claimed it for themselves.
John Del Rose calls it like the cat lady genre.
It is.
I mean, it's pretty much written by wine Karens now, you know?
Wine Karens, yes. So that's exactly what I wanted to avoid, was the wine Karen sort of spiel. So I set out to actually make enjoyable young adult fiction that was also enjoyable by adults. It just happens to be
the same goal you had with Christian fiction and Deus Vult Wastelanders. Yes,
except that is like ropes of intestines flying through the air and choking people and like all kinds of stuff. So the gore factor goes up to 11 on Deus Vult.
Speaking
of, two more questions, and then I've got a question for you as well. So first, let's go to this one. Underworld Dream. Since earlier you mentioned Warhammer, will we see a Christian-like Warhammer 40K like story from you guys? You know, Space Marines, Crusaders versus planet full of demons and space devil worshippers. Isn't that 40K?
Dude, I'm picturing Doom.
That's also the first half of Gideon Ira.
I would read that in a heartbeat. I think John Del Rose wrote that with his Crusader. I believe, but that's basically mine. Mine's just a wasteland set of in space. So I don't know. Maybe I'll do something like that in space. That'd be pretty awesome. But
I don't know Underworld Dream. I'm just an atheist who isn't an asshole. So I don't know if I'm the right person. And we got one from Bar One Studios. Except catharsis is overrated. Is an overrated concept abused by people who want to throw a screaming mommy and daddy. When they're well into adulthood. Catharsis is the rallying cry for feminists. Any thoughts?
It's even deeper than that. The people that are now wearing the skin suits of the beloved franchises we grew up with have to twist those franchises to validate them, because the original heroes that we grew up with, they don't match those people's worldview, so they have to twist them. Look at what happened with Luke Skywalker. He went from the beacon of light and justice and hope into this ugly, ratty, I hate everyone and I'm willing to murder children. Now I'm going to go live on an island. That's what they want. They had to get inside of those, and the franchises we loved are not written by the people who designed them. They are written by people who needed to twist those things and kill anything that told them they were wrong. So the rest of us are dealing with them doing that.
Well, I mean, I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of storytelling in general. I mean, these are people that read the you know, they go and read like the scholastic understanding of storytelling, like deconstruction and Campbell and, you know, whoever else, and they're like, okay, well, I get this now, I can do this, I can, you know, I can take these pieces apart and put them together any way that I want, and they can't. So they destroy the character, they deconstruct the character, they turn it in, and then deconstruction inevitably they recreate it in the lens of whatever the creator is, whatever the producer, whatever the director, whatever. It always ends up being through them, right? So it's their version of whatever your hero is. That's not Luke. That is, what is it? Ryan, what's his face is Luke.
It's not Shira. It's
Noel Stevenson.
There we go.
You know,
Yeah.
you know, and that's the way it is. That's what they can. That's the only thing they do. Like I said, they take these heroes and they make them. They make them a lens, you know, or they make them a facet of you know, a light through them. And then the problem with that is there's a gap in the storytelling. So then that's when you get the Deus Ex Machina and the MacGuffins, because they're like, oh crap, I took all this stuff out. There's no stuff, and they have to fill it up, and then you get this junk.
Sith Holocron.
And then you get all these prequels that validate their world, so they can say, look, the character was
Exactly.
like this from the beginning.
Because the story doesn't solve itself. Like I always tell people when they ask me, how do I avoid Deus Ex Machina? How do I avoid these kind of things? And I say the story has to solve itself.
I would
Reach
go,
within the story for its, you know, for its purpose.
I would go so far as to say that what we're seeing goes beyond even that. I think what we're seeing is actually cultural. I mean, you look at a lot of these classic franchises and you see the generation that produced them, right? I mean, we had Jack Kirby, right? Created all those great characters. Where did he come from? A middle working class background. He went to war. He came back. He always stood by his values. He was an avid reader of sci-fi. We had again Gene Roddenberry. You know, again, working class background. Went to war. Had kind of the you know, that era's values, and you know, he came. What did he create? This visionary Star Trek. Even Lucas, what small town America was his upbringing.
My hometown.
What?
My hometown.
Oh, really? Okay, there you go.
Same
Right?
hometown, baby.
And in each case, they brought those values with them, and they put their own spin on them, of course. And everything we're getting right now is all coming from one group of people: Hollywood. Hollywood producers, sons and daughters of rich producers, Hollywood people who hang out with Hollywood morals and Hollywood values, people that live in an environment where everyone's constantly ripping everyone off and talking down to everyone else. And are we shocked?
I mean, it goes way deeper than that. I just, like I said, I released a blog post detailing the last 7 generations of breaking attachments and how the human family has crumbled, how our understanding of what love is and what we are worth or not worth, how we have to earn love now. The view is that people have to earn love, this crippling insecurity that is soaked in, the effect of both world wars, the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression, the 50s, the Vietnam War.
Shame is the enemy of empathy. Some of the
I mean, I detailed it and showed how we have marched from 100 years ago believing in objective morality and objective moral good, and that was what our society strove for, to now we have no concept of objective moral good. Everything is relative, and that matches this fundamental breakdown of human attachment, where humans don't believe they can be loved or will be loved, and so they have to be interesting. They have to get attention instead of being loved for who they are. It's a vast difference, and it really ripples through our society in a overwhelming number of ways that a lot of people don't understand yet.
But you know what really exacerbates that is that, you know, you then have, like, you have on the internet, like, you know, we have most of our communication now, and especially most young people's communication is on the internet. They won't even go across the street to visit each other anymore. They'll be like, nah, I'm just gonna text my friend. Why don't you walk over there? No, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
You know, so you have this, but then you have, and I mean, you remember, you probably, you know, these guys since you're in psychology too. Like, there was a book I read not too long ago, Emotional Awareness by Paul Ekman and the Dalai Lama, and they were talking about some of these things, and they were going into the idea of that everybody on the internet is forced to act in a way that would be more that is more related to, like, the way, honestly, like, indigenous females act. Because when they studied like, you know, these like old Aboriginal societies, they found that like, you know, men acted directly and the women tended to poison the relations of the people around them in order to deal with the conflict. Well, when you're on the internet, the only thing that you can really do to actually do anything is poison the relation and thus cancel. So we have increased cancel culture by 1,000-fold. You know, and then you get into the, like I was saying, like shame is the enemy of empathy. I don't know if you like, there's there's a whole, I mean, just all kind of different social psychology studies now that didn't exist in the 1990s even, but that do exist now because of just exactly what you're saying, is that on the internet, you're nothing but your set of interests, your set of personality traits, your attributes, you know what I mean? And that's one of the reasons I think that the isekai genre in Japan takes off so much and people relate to it, because that's what you feel like.
So much, yeah. You have to leave and completely reinvent yourself in a different place where you can actually be who you are instead of being smothered by the culture that we have now.
Exactly.
Give it up, burn it to the ground, and just leave and start over in a new world. That's why isekai is so tremendously popular, because that's what so many people want. Because
it relates to the human experience so well. And I hate it when, like, I just got a comment the other day where this guy was like, oh, that genre and the whole like light novels are just so pulpy, blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't say anything.
As if that's an insult.
It can't be deep. Yeah, and he's like, it can't be deep. And I'm like, you know what? Anything can be deep. Anything can have the veneer, what I call frosty, like Robert Frost, right? Where you can look at it and you can understand it for its simple simplicity and understand the glimmering surface of beautiful facet of the water that you're looking at and stare at the pond all day long, or you can jump the frick in.
And you know what's the first two things that someone in isekai does? Number one, they start accomplishing things, and number two, they find people who love them. And that also is the fantasy right there that people are craving, to be able to accomplish things and be effective in their environment.
Exactly.
And to be loved. And
And
have
that-
people
that-
love them.
I think that stems from a lot of issues that people in Japan are feeling, but I think it's bigger than that. I think it applies really to a lot of America, and that's why it's so popular.
I think it's universal. I think it's universal. That's what I'm saying, is like, we are NPCs. Because most of our connection is online. Most of our connection is on the internet. So who you are in real life isn't you. Your real you is like the internet. So it's already like being in a different world. It's already like going into another world. So I mean, that's universal. I mean, what is it? It's like something like there's 7 billion people and like most of them are on the internet now. So that is our connection. You know, and I agree with you completely. Like I had a blog post on what was it, the Shield Hero, and my summation, you know, was that like he taught the slave how to smile again, and she taught him, or she gave him something to fight for. She gave him something to care about. And isn't that what we really want? I mean, you know, in psychology, like social psychology, they talk about that one of the main things that to stem off depression nowadays is purpose, autonomy, complexity, and purpose.
Right. Well, when are men most depressed? When do they become depressed? It's when they have no power to affect their environment. It's when they are impotent and helpless. When they are helpless, that's when men become depressed, because they feel like they are completely, I don't want to say useless, but they feel like they have absolutely no power over their environment or power to make their pain stop. Their depression increases as they start to believe that will never change. Hopelessness, that is the indicator for more severity. You know this. So helplessness begins it. Hopelessness increases it. That's why escapism with isekai is so powerful, because the hero goes to this other world and can do anything. All of a sudden, you have power in your own hands, whether it's the overpowered one where he goes there, he's maxed out level, or he goes there and he's weak but begins building himself up. Whatever it might be, he can do something. He can affect change in his environment. He can make change happen in the world, and people start paying attention because he becomes a powerful player. And he finds people who just love him. He may earn some of that love through grand works, but he finds people who just love him obsessively, and it may be multiple people who love him obsessively.
Brandon Barnell would probably appreciate that.
Probably so, but I mean, those are the two male fantasies right now, is to have the power to affect change in your environment with your own hands, and to be loved. Those are the two biggest male fantasies right now.
And the depression of modern men is visualized in the collapse of the hero.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the loss of masculinity in society. You can see it in Luke Skywalker. You can
Very
see
true.
it
The last stage, Steal the Dreams, right?
Well, it's even deeper than that, because the old stories, the heroes upheld their moral virtues, and modern storytelling tells us it is impossible to uphold your moral virtues. So choose the lesser evil that you can and just sort of crawl along as you slowly give up your principles and have no power.
I'd go even further and say the modern stories say there are no virtues.
Yeah, that's very true also.
That's one of the reasons that they hate the canon, is that a lot of the canon is about virtues. Like when you look at Les Miserables, Les Miserables is about two people with incredibly fierce worldviews, Justice, Javert, and Mercy, Valjean, and they come into conflict, and it's a battle of who can uphold it. But that just bounces off of these modern readers, because they just don't understand that kind of, I don't know, commitment to a belief.
All right, well, we are coming up to the last 4 minutes of the show, so I would recommend we all basically do a quick who we are, where we can get our materials, and I guess call it a night. You cool with that?
That
Sounds good to me.
Okay, let's start with our guest, Adam.
I am Adam Lane Smith. You can find me at adamlanesmith.com, where I am being Adam Lane Smith. My books, Gideon Ira and Knight of the Blood Cross, is available for 99 cents on Amazon. The first hit is almost free, and then it'll drag you right into the series. I am on Twitter at the Prometheus. I am all over the place doing all kinds of things. So those are the big places you can really find me.
And the links for those are in the description.
Nice.
Buddy?
Hey, everybody. You can reach me at the Buddy Lord. I put it in the chat on Twitter, and bladeknight.com is my website. Please join the mailing list. We're going to launch the graphic novel next week, June the 5th. At 1K subs, I'm already at 940. Everybody gets a free digital download for book 1 of Sins of the Fae. I've had this guy, Zevius, working on it up in Canada, art director. It looks amazing. It's going to be fantastic. Everybody's going to love it. So get in on that while you can. And, I leave it to Mr. William.
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Mr. Will Hastings. My first book, The Crimson Spark, book 1 of Vagabond Legacy, is available on Amazon. And my second book, Vatican Championship Wrestling, the Indiegogo for that is going to be starting this summer.
I can't freaking wait for that one, man.
Wow.
You and me both. I'm very excited to bring that to everybody.
Sorry I interrupted you.
No, that's fine. I was done.
You showed me the cover a long time ago, and I can't wait to have a paperback copy in my hands just so I can show it to people. It is so incredibly awesome.
It's been quite a, it's been very fun, because it's one of those things where somebody looks across the table at you at Thanksgiving and they're like, "Oh, what book have you been working on, William?" And I'm like, "Well, you may be surprised."
So do we get a nun in there at some point giving a Macho Man and Randy Savage type rant?
That's the whole book.
Oh, great. Okay, I want this one.
Oh, man, I can't wait.
And I am J Ishiro Finney, author and alien in a human suit. And right now on Amazon.com, I would like you to check out my novella, Scars, which falls somewhere in between A Boy and His Dog and The Rats of Nim, if it took place in a setting somewhat like James Corey's The Expanse. It's a very personal story for me. It has a lot of my own experiences coming back from the horrors of dealing with my near death and the post-traumatic stress that came with it, and moving on. I think this is probably the most personal story I've ever written, yet it still is hard science fiction. And yes, there's a rat in it. So that is it. You, Kat?
Mm-hmm. And I am the Night Editor. You can find me at nighteditor.com, where you can also find all of the previous episodes of the of the Writers Room. If you've missed any, go check it out. And thank you, Adam, for joining us this evening. Thank you, Buddy. Thank you, William. And thank you all in the chat for joining us. It's been a great evening, and we'll see you all next week.
All right. Now